Werewolves, one of the most infamous creatures of the night. I mean, we're all familiar with these half-man, half-wolf monsters that have clawed their way into the cultural consciousness. Some people know them from books, and some people know them from movies, but it's irrefutable that no matter where you know them from, it's clear that werewolves have left a lasting impression. They've become iconic figures in movies like An American Werewolf in London, the Underworld series of movies, and even the Twilight movies. Now, outside the Hollywood glitz and glamour, the novels, the comics, the books, and the stories, there's a really rich and ancient folklore that predates everything that we know werewolves from in popular culture today, and that's what I'm gonna talk to you about right now. Before we get into the meat of today's topic, I wanna just say a quick thank you to all of you for stopping by. I really do appreciate it, and before we proceed, I do want to take a second to ask, before moving on, if we could take a moment to please like and subscribe really quick just for the algorithm. I'll justify it by saying this: it's completely free and you can undo it if you want to at any given point in time. And now, the reason we're all here: werewolves. Okay, so where did werewolves originate? When did we start telling this story of the half-man, half-wolf beast? When did we first start sharing this narrative of a human transforming into a bloodthirsty wolf monster in the moonlight? The earliest thing I found was in Greek mythology. The idea of humans transforming into werewolves is associated with the legend of the Lycaon, which is a myth that popped up around 800 BCE, or like around 3,000 years ago. Lycaon was the mythical king of Arcadia, and his story is often cited as one of the earliest accounts that we can find of lycanthropy. And according to this myth, Lycaon was known for being extremely cruel. And he wanted to test the god of gods, Zeus, and he wanted to put his omniscience to the test to see if maybe he could trick him. Lycaon invited Zeus to a banquet, and he served him the roasted flesh of his own son, hoping to trick Zeus into thinking it was a different kind of meat. Zeus was absolutely enraged by this act, overturned the table, and then he transformed Lycaon into a wolf as his punishment. In some interpretations of this story, Lycaon's transformation is immediate and instant, and in other versions of the myth, it's a long, drawn-out process of transformation. And this myth serves as one of the earliest origins of the story of humans transforming into werewolves. So from very early on, this transformation is heavily associated with divine sort of punishment, divine judgment, specifically for heinous acts or very cruel, unjust acts. It speaks as a lesson to kind of emphasize the consequences of immoral actions in humans. While the myth of Lycaon is not super detailed and elaborate as many other myths are, it definitely lays down all the groundwork for the myth of lycanthropy in many other cultures. Now, around 1,200 to 1,300 years ago, during the Viking Age, Norse mythology witnessed the immersion of a group of people called the Berserkers. The Berserkers were a group of warriors that were known for wearing wolf skins, and this was a symbolic connection to wolves in the sense that they did this as a preparation for going into battle to embody the strength and courage that they associated with wolves. They believed in the transformative power of this practice with the intention of entering like a trance-like state before going into battle. It's said that they wanted to do this to embrace extraordinary courage and ferocity. The symbolism of the wolf in Norse mythology is like super often associated with Odin, and this played a super huge part in forming like the ethos of Nordic warriors. Now the Christian influence on the werewolf folklore is like super significant, specifically during the medieval period when Christian beliefs began to greatly shape the majority of European values and the values of European societies at the time. This meant that there was like a universal association of werewolves with occultism and witchcraft and all kinds of negative supernatural presences. As Christianity spread, pagan beliefs and practices, including those related to shapeshifting and animal transformations, these were often super condemned and looked down upon, frowned upon. And the church at the time really wanted to suppress these pagan elements. And as a result of that, the folklore surrounding werewolves and anything having to do with werewolves became completely entangled with this Christian view of like sin and the devil. And because of this, during the witch hunts of the early medieval times, from as early as 600 years ago to up to 300 years ago, Accusations of werewolf transformations were often right alongside accusations of witchcraft and people being witches. People were accused of using magical ointments to transform themselves or others into werewolves. And then obviously, once a werewolf, engaging in nefarious activities. And the trials that were often the byproduct of these accusations led to like super severe consequences for anyone who was accused. A lot of people were imprisoned or tortured, and a great deal of people who were accused of being werewolves were for sure executed. And it also would happen very often where people who now we would consider them as having some kind of like medical condition that could have been treated or recognized medically, these people were also accused of being werewolves. And just like the people before them, they would be persecuted for what we would now consider to be either like a genetic disorder or some kind of mental illness. The fear of werewolves, much like the fear of witches, became part of a broader, more cultural religious context, where things that were occult or pagan or demonic were seen as a threat to Christian society at the time. In the 19th century, a resurgence in things like Gothic or supernatural themes had a big influence on the literature, and this brought werewolves back into the spotlight. Some notable works during this time period were The Werewolf by Clemens Hausmann, which was published in 1896. This short story dives into the tragic narrative of a young woman who's struggling with werewolfism or lycanthropy as she grapples with the psychological and the social implications of her condition. Gothic novels were super prominent during the 19th century, and they more often incorporated werewolf folklore into the literature. This was like super often used to just enhance the eerie atmosphere. Writers like Anne Radcliffe and Matthew Lewis would continue this tradition, often incorporating them into the supernatural themes of their writing. And beyond fiction, scholars at the time would often collect regional folklore and document regional folklore, which very often included stories of regional werewolves. But because of that effort, this did a lot to help preserve and popularize the werewolf kind of fairy tales from a whole bunch of different cultural perspectives. And with all that being said, werewolves were not as prominent in the 19th century as they would become in the 20th century. This time period specifically played a super crucial role in shaping the presence of werewolves in general. I would even go so far as to say it laid the groundwork for the presence of werewolves in popular culture today. Now, speaking of werewolves in popular culture today, I want to take a second to talk about, sorry about the costume change, it's a completely different day. Something came up, but let's get right back into what we're talking about. So the movie Cursed from 2005 is Wes Craven's take on the werewolf mythos. Wes Craven is the guy who did Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy Krueger movies. And in his version, in this movie, unlike the classic trope of the transformation being because of the full moon, it's triggered in this film by surviving a werewolf attack. And the catch in this movie is that these transformations can happen at any time, so not just during the full moon. I think this goes to add like a super chaotic element into this film and like the representation of like the transformation, try to make it more chaotic. I don't know if you can hear my roosters outside there. It's like 6 a.m, so my roosters are starting to wake up. So this film follows a pair of siblings named Ellie and Jimmy, and they're in high school. And these siblings are played by Jesse Eisenberg and Christina Ricci, I think. She's the girl who played Wednesday Addams in the OG Addams Family movie. And the premise is pretty much that after a car accident that involves a werewolf attack that they go through, they are now kind of suffering the consequences and dealing with these like random chaotic werewolf transformations that they undergo. And it's like it's a curse. And these transformations are completely unpredictable. There is a scene in this movie that I think is like super corny and telling of like early 2000s films, but I think it also like works really well. There's like a scene where Jimmy tries out for the wrestling team and he kind of puts his like strength, his new werewolf strength on display. And there's also this like kind of alpha male hierarchy trope in this movie. But I do like super recommend this movie. It's definitely an early 2000s movie in the sense of like if you watch it, you know what I'm talking about. But I do recommend it. I think it's a really good movie and I just watched it again recently. So I do highly recommend it. But in a nutshell, I think this movie uses the werewolf again as a metaphor for like personal struggles, almost the unpredictability aspect again of human nature, and it's kind of conveyed through these like unpredictable transformations that they're like dealing with. It's like a struggle or a problem for them, these transformations that can happen at any given moment. I definitely like the modern take on the werewolf mythology, and I think this movie Cursed is like a really good example of films that I like, that I think they do justice to like modernizing the werewolf mythos. So from ancient myths of Viking warriors and witch hunts, the werewolf folklore has been definitely weaving its way into the public consciousness for a really long time. It's had its place in ancient Greece, ancient Rome. The Norse berserkers rocked wolf skins before going into battle to try to absorb the energy and the power of the werewolf, right? To be in this animalistic state. And ultimately, we now remember these guys as... And ultimately, we remember the berserkers as like super badasses. So, I mean, I guess it probably worked. Things got super intense in the medieval period when werewolfism and like the lore around werewolves got like super mixed up with the occult and like the witch trials. Fast forward to the 19th century when werewolves are making like a super comeback into like all kinds of literature. And then bring it right back to today, where werewolves are commonplace and like everyone understands, you know, like I said, they're like in Twilight, they're in everything. They're much more than this ancient piece of mythology. They're complex characters worth exploring and contemplating in films, still in literature. They're a modern representation of transformation for sure. Yeah, and that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you guys for rocking with me through this video. I really do appreciate it. And before we go, I've been tossing around the idea of doing like an audio only version of this. So go ahead, let me know what you guys think. I mean, I think it'd be cool that way. Like, I know that not everybody has like YouTube Red, so if I put together like a playlist of all of these videos that I'm working on as an audio only version, link it down below as like a Spotify playlist. I don't know. I was thinking about that. Also, if there's anything else werewolf related that you think I should know about or I should check out, let me know. Drop it down below. I would love to look into some more stuff, definitely. If you guys have anything, or if you guys have like more media I should check out. It was really fun to get into the werewolf lore and do a little research. Also, check out the movie Cursed. I can't recommend it enough. It's kind of corny in parts, but I think it's a good movie. I liked watching it for the research. And as always, my socials, all my other socials are going to be linked down below. If you want to give me a follow, hit me up, chop it up whenever, you know, feel free. And again, thank you guys for stopping by. Your support on these videos means the absolute world to me. Thank you so much. Have a good night.